24번 탈락.
병신 걸렸네.
This is Squid Game, and this is Battle Royale.
1、2、3、4、5、6、腕を回します。
The movie that Squid Game is commonly said to have ripped off, but there's actually much more to the story than this rudimentary accusation. These two projects are entries into a vibrant and thriving genre, one that is growing more popular by the day and one that also is consistently cannibalizing itself.
나가면 뭐가 달라? 어차피 나가도 생 지옥이야, 이 씨발.
Squid Game was released on September 17th, 2021. The project soon took the world by storm, becoming the biggest hit Netflix had seen since Stranger Things. However, the tidal wave of adulation from a global audience also came with some significant critiques about the originality of the project's core foundation. In fact, Netflix is currently being sued over the project's similarity to an Indian film titled Luck. The credibility of this lawsuit is pretty weak though, as stories about people attempting to survive a deadly game have existed for decades. Some might say the first popular entry into the franchise is 1987's Running Man starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. In it, we follow a convicted felon who's forced to compete in a race for his life, while also wearing yellow spandex. It was the 80s. But the true origins of this survival game genre date back even further. The short story, The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell, was published in 1924. It follows a sadistic count named Zaroff who hunts humans for sport.
Man is the most dangerous animal of all. That's the whole point of the story.
This story would eventually be adapted into a feature film in 1932. The idea of hunting our fellow man for both pleasure and survival would spawn its own genre of stories. From First Blood to Deadly Prey to Thunder Warrior, out of this basic structure, the survival game genre would evolve and achieve global success. The two most prominent examples of these films are things like The Hunger Games and the previously mentioned Japanese manga turned film franchise Battle Royale. But it would be Squid Game, created by Hwang Dong-hyuk, that would put a new and fresh spin on the genre. He started working on the project all the way back in 2008 during the Korean debt crisis, and the themes of crushing capitalism are still as relevant today. If somehow you're not familiar, the high concept of Squid Game is we follow a down-on-his-luck gambling addict named Seong Ji-hoon as he voluntarily joins a series of high-risk, high-reward games that are based on Korean childhood pastimes. The twist being, if you lose, you die, and if you win, you gain exorbitant wealth. The key differentiating factor that separates Squid Game from other entries into this genre is that the show is less interested in how the killing happens, and more interested in the why anyone put themselves in this position. So much of both Hunger Games and Battle Royale involves our characters forming alliances, plotting to kill each other, and using various weapons to bring about the untimely end of their competitors. That's theoretically the thrill for the audience, the exhilaration of witnessing our characters defend themselves and survive the hand-to-hand combat. Though Squid Game still presents the audience with visually thrilling games, it's more about the societal architecture that has put people into this mindset of desperation. It's more concerned with the psychology of the individuals within the story than the narrative building blocks of sci-fi world building or the vicarious thrill of the inventiveness of the kills. Squid Game cares exclusively about motivation. Medical debts, gambling debts, and corporate fraud. Every member of the cast has agreed to take part in this outlandish competition because their financial needs have forced them into scenarios where they have no alternative. We come to know the characters, feel sympathy for them due to the harshness of their backstories, and empathize with their choices. That is a key element of the genre overall. Every viewer of these survival game films is always asking themselves, what would I do in this scenario? And Squid Game capitalizes on this idea maybe more than any other. Despite this show being made in Korea, the problems everyone struggles with are instantly narrative connective tissue to a global audience. Squid Game creator Hwang Dong-hyuk said in an interview, "I wanted to make this show for people to realize that the world is unfair and ask themselves why and where we can start to make changes. I'm not trying to say that capitalism is bad in and of itself. I just wanted to raise this question about what we can do to change our system to be a fairer one." Squid Game evolves the metaphor of the typical survival game into something deeply personal. Sure, it's influenced by Battle Royale. The creator has openly admitted he was writing Squid Games and manhwa cafes while literally reading Battle Royale. But it's the emphasis on the humanity and struggle of the characters that evolves it into more than just a ripoff.
뒤에 숨어서 아들놈이 노는 거를 몰래 훔쳐봤지. 어찌나 재밌게 놀든지.
The show doesn't stop at just examining the contestants of the game though. It also shows how the architecture of the game also harms the guards, literally dehumanizing them and killing them if any of the players even learns what they look like. The show paints these guards as desperate men in their own right, even going so far as to attempt to use their position to make money harvesting the organs of dead players. It doesn't take a genius to see that this is an extension of the same metaphorical oppression that capitalism is exacting on every character within the show. Squid Game expertly showcases how these economic systems strip us of our humanity. Sure, the other survival game projects literalize this idea as well. Pitting teenagers against each other in mortal combat because of overpopulation isn't exactly a super complicated metaphor either, but Squid Game carries that metaphor through in multiple, ever complicated ways. Take for example in episode 4 titled Stick to the Team, when the contestants realize that when people die outside the games, 1 million won gets added to the prize pool, thus pitting the contestants against each other even further.
오늘은 절대로 자면 안 돼. 불 꺼지면 무슨 일이 벌어질지 몰라.
Our small ragtag group of protagonists band together in an attempt to survive a nighttime slaughter. This shows how the only way to attempt to weather economic downturns is to band together with found family, and that when given a hint of money, most people are absolutely out for themselves. Squid Game's strength lies in its abilities to put characters between a rock and a hard place. Yes, the show is a metaphorical representation of the struggle for survival, but when that fight moves beyond the binary of life and death and forces you into a moral dilemma, that's great storytelling. It's one thing to kill someone in self-defense, however, what's the right thing to do when you're playing a game and you know the answer to a specific problem? This scenario plays out in episode 3, The Man with the Umbrella. One of the contestants realizes before anyone else that they'll be playing a game that involves breaking shapes out of cookie wafers. Should you help the people you've said you would make an alliance with, or should you purposefully attempt to help only the weakest members of the competition in order to increase your own chances of winning? Moral quandaries like this are what help Squid Game push beyond being genre fair and become something that connected with a global audience. In hindsight, this might look purposeful, like Netflix was attempting to engineer a hit. However, it's almost the exact opposite. Min Young Kim, Netflix's top exec in the Asian market, told The Hollywood Reporter that the reason Squid Game has such great meaning for us internally is that it's perfect evidence that our international strategy has been right. We've always believed the most locally authentic shows will travel best. Ultimately, Squid Game is far more than a rip-off of things like Hunger Games and Battle Royale. It's a deeply human story, told from a hyper-specific perspective, and that's why it worked. Hopefully, more great stories will be made from underrepresented voices from places that Americans don't typically contemplate. Overall, Squid Game's biggest strength is the simple fact that being crushed by capitalism is a universal experience. And well, that's all we have for this episode. What do you think? Is Squid Game something of an outlier? Or will we soon see an influx of stories from non-US artists getting universal acclaim? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, like, comment, and subscribe for more Nerdstalgic videos just like this.